Hi, today we're in the town of Willow Springs, just outside Rosemont, California. Founded in the 1850s, when travelers were heading up to the gold rush in Kern County, near today's Lake Isabella. So let me tell you about this town. So before the railroad came through Rosemont, a traveler headed north through Antelope Valley would likely pass through this town. This was once a watering hole for stagecoach travelers for generations, but since then the springs have dried up. The springs were originally used by Native Americans for centuries. Then in the 1850s, they served travelers headed up to the gold rush in Kern County near today's Lake Isabella. Then further grew after Owens Valley opened up to the cattlemen supplying the mines along the California-Nevada border. So the current town was settled back in 1862 when 23-year-old Nelson Ward and his 14-year-old wife Adelia settled next to the willow brush covered butte with a few good sources of water. Nelson came from Ohio and Adelia came from Boston. The town soon became known as Willow Springs. They built a small adobe structure called the boarding house and kept a number of horse and mule teams. The Wards were gracious hosts, but the boarding house was pretty cramped and hectic. Many guests had to sleep in the bar, and customers had to gobble down their breakfast in such haste that the stop was nicknamed Hotel de Rush. In the 1860s, with the discovery of silver at Cerro Gordo in the Inyo Mountains, even more travelers, miners, and mule teams passed through Willow Springs. Los Angeles was Cerro Gordo mine's main supply point, so all of the silver and supplies had to eventually pass through Willow Springs on the trail back and forth from LA to the mines. So up here in the hill, we have an old mine shaft, right up here. Eventually, there were 80 teams of 3 wagons, each pulled by 16 mules, which hauled the bars of silver from the smelter at Owens Lake to the port of San Pedro. They could only make about 15 miles per day, and each road trip took about 8 weeks. So there are lots of stations along the trail to rest and resupply, like here at Willow Springs. Nelson Ward died in 1873, leaving his widowed 25-year-old wife with 5 children in the Willow Springs station. So just out here is where the old town of Willow Springs used to be, with its buildings, but nothing's really here now. We'll cruise down the road and see if we can find some old foundations or a structure or something. 2 years later, the Cerro Gordo mine changed its mule team route out to join the newly proposed railroad outside Tehachapi Mountains. So Adelia was forced to move out of Willow Springs, remarried, and opened a hotel in Tehachapi Summit. She died in 1881. In 1875, Willow Springs was taken over by a man named Riley. In 1876, the rail line was completed through Solid Canyon, making travel through the Antelope Valley obsolete. The Ward's adobe abode was essentially in ruins by the mid-1880s. So in 1900, Ezra Hamilton, who found gold at the nearby Tropico mine, he bought Willow Springs and the surrounding 160 acres. He built new stone buildings and turned the property into a resort with swimming pool and dance hall. The stone buildings still exist, and to some extent, but the original adobe stage is all gone. All right, so at Willow Springs, we have a plaque here telling us all about this place, California Historic Landmark of Willow Springs. Willow Springs was a stage station on the Los Angeles Havelock stage lines from 1864 to 1872. From here, light traffic went through Oak Creek Pass via Tehachapi Valley to Havelock and Kernville. Heavy traffic went northeast to the Inyo Mines or via Jawbone Canyon to the South Fork of the Kern, thence to the Kern Mines. This plaque is dedicated in 1937. And here's some beautiful horses. Hello. Hello. All right, on to our next stop. All right. So that's the story of Willow Springs. Once this great trade stop for all the mule teams. Thanks for watching. Bye.